Libros Schmibros is a podcast exploring the people, books, movies, and ideas that Angelinos care about in a thoughtful way that even New Yorkers can understand. We're coming to you from Libros Schmibros, our nonprofit bilingual lending library in Boyle Heights, on the west coast of the country and the east bank of the mighty Los Angeles River.
Hi, everybody. This is Colleen Jaurretche. I'm co-founder of Libros Schmibros, and I am here today to talk to you about Eavan Boland. Eavan Boland was one of the great poets of Ireland, and very sadly, she passed away on April 27th. And I wanted us to talk a little bit about her, and I wanted to share an interview that I had the good luck to make with Boland in fall of 2010 at Stanford University, where she taught and where she was the head of creative writing. And the interview preceded her visit to the Huntington Library in 2011, where Libros and other pals, including Culture Ireland, hosted a conference on James Joyce. And in both instances, Boland was extraordinarily gracious with her time and with her poetry. And she read us, and when at the Huntington Library, read us her poem entitled "That the Science of Cartography is Limited," and we'll have a chance to hear her share that with us at the end of the interview. But what we're going to play first is a clip of the Stanford conversation. And David was there with me. You'll hear him in the background asking a question or two, and even with a little case of the sniffles. But that didn't seem to bother Boland in the least. And she gave her time quite handsomely, and I think you'll find it very interesting. So with no further ado, let us hear from Boland. Thanks.
The other poem that really, I suppose, addressed this for me, I mean, this was part of a conversation inside myself that happened in trying to, work out what it means to be a poet from a small country, what it means to be a poet from a powerful history, how we give a name to something or suddenly find that something is unnamed. This is a poem called "That the Science of Cartography is Limited." And it comes from, my husband comes from the middle of the country, from County Meath. Meath and Mayo were both two counties in which you find something in Ireland called famine roads. And these are the roads which, during the terrible famine of 1847, the British sent over these committees to decide what relief to give to the poor and starving Irish. And they would only give them food in return for work. And of course, they had no strength to work. And sometimes when you look down in the woods there, you see these roads give out into nothing, where the people died building them. But they don't show up on a map, and that's what this poem is. That the science of cartography is limited, and not simply by the fact that this shading of forest cannot show the fragrance of balsam, the gloom of cypresses, is what I wish to prove. When you and I were first in love, we drove to the borders of Connacht and entered a wood there. Look down, you said. This was once a famine road. I looked down at ivy and the Scotch grass rough cast stone had disappeared into, as you told me in the second winter of their ordeal, in 1847, when the crop had failed twice. Relief committees gave the starving Irish such roads to build. Where they died, there the road ended and ends still. And when I take down the map of this island, it is never so. I can say here is the masterful, the apt rendering of the spherical as flat, nor an ingenious design which persuades a curve into a plane, but to tell myself again that the line which says woodland and cries hunger and gives out among sweet pine and cypress and finds no horizon will not be there. Now, I'm lucky enough to teach at Stanford University.
Do you still feel that you are an exile returning to Dublin?
No, that would be a glamorous interpretation, you know, of my life. No, I don't. I feel that, you know, I belong to, you know, I'm a Dubliner. I go back there. I feel connected. I've always felt very connected to the enterprise of Irish writing. And, you know, I think I just take it at that level.
So much of our conversation has been talking about how you put together a poem. And to the popular reader, it might sound somewhat highfalutin. What is the best thing that scholars or scholarship can do to perhaps bridge a divide between popular readership and academic pursuit?
You know, it's a very interesting question, and I don't want to set it aside, but I'm not sure I'm in agreement with it. You know, I don't think the popular reader is the one who ever found anything highfalutin. I mean, there's an Irish language phrase, it's quoted to me and translated as a poem that lives in the hearts of the people. I think many people, especially in Ireland, feel entitled to poetry. And they remember it, and they read it, and I'm absolutely certain of that. There is no divide between them and the poem. The nervousness in the academy occasionally about attitudes to poetry seems to me misplaced. People don't have a problem, you know, in Ireland reading poetry. And they have no difficulty with it. They may have strong views, and they are a willful readership, and there's not, poets have not had nearly as much trouble with them as prose writers have. And they may be a willful readership, but they are a readership, and I don't think they back away in any way from the poem because of difficulty, nor do I think the poem should negotiate on that basis. I think the Academy has a different view, and I think that is a difficulty for them. I don't think it's a difficulty for the poet or the reader. The poet just has to write the best poem they can, and the reader just has to find that poem. And, you know, it happens surprisingly often that people do both.
What does the Academy need to do in order to lose this particular anxiety? Or maybe a different way to ask it is, what sort of research ought to be conducted, or what would stimulate productive research on poetry?
I think there has been very productive research in Irish studies on poetry. I think there has. I think there's been a lot of very good writing on Irish poetry. I'm not sure it's so much textual as contextual, but I think the contextual writing on Irish poetry has been very good. And I just think that, you know, I think probably a lot of Irish writers and a lot of prose writers would know. I mean, poets have a very central place in Ireland. There are a lot of difficulties within the long relationship of the Irish writing cohort to Irish society. It's a long story. But a lot of people, including myself, believe that the generation that you live in that has a difficulty will have sons and daughters and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who will be able to imagine their country better because Irish writers have written it. That paradigm is not contested, as far as I know, by anybody. It's just awkward in the present. I mean, it was awkward for James Joyce. It was awkward for Brinsley McNamara when they burned his book. It was, you know, outrageous for John McGahern when they banned his. But in the end, the redemption of that is that generations later, people live in the country those people wrote. And that is a much more amenable place for them to live than if they had not written. And that is a thrice told tale in Irish writing. And I think that all Irish writers understand that. And all Irish writers understand that the present is not the future. When I was a young writer, I found it very difficult in Irish writing, and often very exasperating. But I also knew that that was true. I did, and I have never changed my mind on that.
How about in this country?
How do you think your work would have been different if you hadn't become binational?
It's very hard to know where you really live. I have always thought I live, I think you remember places, and of course I love California, and it's a majestic state, but I think you always live in one place in your mind, and I'm not even sure that place is the contemporary place. I think the place I live in is the Dublin I knew and connected with and imagined, and I'm not sure that city is there, and it's a very good question, and every writer's life, was it ever there? I mean, that city you imagine so intensely, and that place you imagine, was that ever there? Was that a place? I mean, I think that, Joyce's very interesting sense of the fiction and the fact of a place is a huge part of his work.
So ends another episode of Libros Schmibros, recorded at the bilingual nonprofit Libros Schmibros Lending Library in Boyle Heights. By all means, follow us online in all the old familiar places, or email us via info@libroschmibros.org. By the way, we couldn't do this podcast without the whole Libros team: Cuauhtemoc, Colleen, Diana, and Alberto. And all of them would kill me if I didn't add this. Please consider visiting libroschmibros.org, hitting the donut button, the donate button, and giving us a gift. We put good free books into people's hands 5 days a week here at Libros, right across from Mariachi Plaza, up in the old Boyle Hotel. I'm David Kippen, and there'll always be a free book for you, and thousands more to borrow here at Libros Schmibros.